The fact is I think it's something like 20 to 22% of waste in the world is recycled. Less than a quarter is recycled, even informally. In a lot of countries, I think in Thailand as well, you see there'll be some chap collecting some cables and things you can even give things from your home.
Right.
That's the informal sector, and then there's the formal sector. That means that most of the waste is still out there, going to landfills. And the rate of recycling is increasing. People are getting more aware. Mm-hmm. But the rate at which waste is being generated is like 5 times more than the rate at which it's being recycled.
Yep. Hello and welcome to Seta Connect, a digital hub of conversation about sustainability, energy and technology. And today, for this episode, we are joined by
Ira Gupta. Hi.
Hello, Ms. Gupta.
Nice to be here.
Ms. Gupta is the director of IXOM Consulting, a London-based company with a strong presence in the Southeast Asia.
So
Welcome.
I can speak a bit more. We're a company, we've been around for about 10 years and we have strong roots in London, but a presence here in Asia, which is one of the most complex urban environments on earth, I feel.
Yeah.
We work quite a lot across city infrastructure segments, but particularly in mobility, electric mobility, sustainable cities, and also in energy transition. Yeah. And we work with a range of clients, whether it's green funds, investors, public bodies, making policies, and actually asset operators who actually run these systems.
Who are your existing current clients that you're working with at the moment? Because I hear you work with mobility, and I wonder, is Mr. Musk involved in any way?
Not directly, but he has been influential, as you know, in growing the whole segment. We do work with a range of public transport operators globally, really. So these are all the big names who are running fleets of buses and commercial taxis in lots of parts of the world. We are working with Southeast Asian government bodies as well. So it is indirectly through multilateral funds where, the policies and regulations are still being fine-tuned in a lot of these new markets.
Yeah.
So we try to help benchmark them to international standards.
Because you work with a lot of SMEs, especially in Southeast Asia, there's a lot of SMEs going on and they need help with that, trying to promote the CSR and everything.
Yes, so at the grassroots level, this is where a lot of the policy, it's too high level, but when you start going down, things don't get implemented, and that's where the gaps come. For that, we have some very good partnerships actually with nonprofits in South Asia, but also now growingly in Southeast Asia. We have partnerships with academic institutions, and what we try to do is use a lot of community consultation. Mm-hmm. Most of these projects have a very big segment of stakeholder consultation. Before any law or policy gets passed, you want to hear from everybody around the table because you don't want it falling flat, when it's passed and not actually making the changes you want it to.
Then that would be considered greenwashing in a way.
That would be, and that is another problem that we can talk about, especially when it comes to things like battery waste and things like that.
Let's start off with that battery waste. So with recycling the batteries, existing batteries, what kind of batteries are we talking about here? Not just batteries and home appliances, but with mobility, that's like...
A lot of things, yeah.
Okay, if I were to own a EV car, what is the battery in that car? What's the size of it? Well, what is it? I kind of want to know. And how is it going to be recycled? And what is the lifespan for a battery like that?
Okay, lots of questions. We'll go step by step. Maybe let's try to define electronic waste, e-waste, right, to start with, which has been around for ages before these car batteries came. And the United Nations actually has a report, it's called like a digital waste monitoring and tracking study. They do this periodically. There was one in 22, and they estimated there's 62 million tons of battery waste that the planet is generating. So
How much?
60, that basically translates to 7.8 kgs per person. So each of us is generating, in theory, about 7.8 kg of electronic waste per year. Obviously, it's
7.8 kilograms of electrical waste
every person on Earth.
Per person.
Per person. So if you do 62 million tons by the population of the world, this is
8 billion.
Yeah. So you approximately, but obviously it's not the same because the wealthier countries are generating more per person, and the less
Developing
wealthy ones
countries
are not doing that
Right.
that much. Having said that, Asia is generating about half of the world's electronic waste at the moment. We're also home to half of the world's population, so you can say it's there. But then per capita wise, Europe and the Americas are generating a lot more. That's electronic waste, which does include, like you say, your home appliances and your white goods and computers and laptops. Then you come to a car battery, and the estimates are electric car batteries could be around 11 million tons of waste on top of the 62 by 2030. So this is rapidly going to go up, and it's going to become quite a big problem very soon if we don't address it.
I don't want to see the graph.
Yeah, it's unless we do
Crazy.
something. And then, of course, there are things happening. So the good thing is there's a recognition, which is the first step. There's a recognition that we need to tackle this. Then coming to your question of car battery. So a car battery could be around, average medium-sized electric car could have about a 450 kilogram in weight car battery. It could go as much as 900 for the bigger versions, the Mr. Musk versions, basically.
Cybertruck versions.
Yeah, or something like that, or even bigger for that. So it depends on the kind of power as well. But of these, about 15% of the battery is very valuable material that you can extract. And it's things like lithium, cobalt. In fact, there's probably even more, graphite and magnesium, lots of things in there. But quite a lot of it is potentially valuable and critical raw material that you can
Still extract from it after
Yes.
its lifespan.
Yes, absolutely. And lifespan is another tricky, very, very tricky question because it depends a little bit on the type of battery and the composition and the usage. Usually manufacturers will have something called charge cycles.
Yeah.
So they'll say this battery has 5,000 charge cycles or 8,000 charge cycles, depending on how much it's being used. So it could be a couple of years, like for buses. I mean, at the beginning of the industry, maybe every 2 or 3 years, the batteries were sort of falling flat or only performing at half the capacity.
Yeah.
But now it's getting better with R&D, so it's more and more years.
I know for a fact that, well, what Tesla marketized itself as, it has, I don't know about the charge span, but the lifespan of around 8 to 9 years. Well, obviously they marketize it as more, but factually it's around that time. So, and if it was to, that car, specific car, my car, was to be discontinued, what will happen to the battery? And is there an organization, association, or anyone who is going to be able to, and are doing recycling those batteries right now, currently?
So yes, there is, in fact, there is now a lot of legislation mandating people. In the beginning, it's true, like people were sort of freewheeling a bit, we've got the car and, Increasingly the thinking is that the manufacturers themselves have to start getting involved in this chain because these batteries are fairly complex, by the way. It's not really easy to dismantle them. And sometimes there's sort of IP into the battery, as well, and they're not willing to share that. So some of them have to go back to the manufacturer in any case. The EU has actually made some very good legislations, as always. The EU is sort of ahead of the game. Last year, they've mandated that all new batteries over time must have some content of recycled material in them. The recycling industry is very nascent for two reasons. One, the economics are not quite there. So actually, only about 1% of these critical raw materials are recycled because it's still cheaper to mine them straight, from the ground than to recycle.
Okay.
And I suspect that's because the social and environmental cost of mining is not being put in this analysis. That's kind of a hunch, or what a lot of people actually say is true. But we've got to make it through incentives or policies much more profitable to recycle them. So, and as Europe has done, mandate that certain percentage of the batteries must have recycled content. So it encourages people to go into that process.
You can't just chuck it away and, leave it in a drawer or something and not do anything about it, which is what a lot of people are doing at the moment. Maybe because the people, I see this, occur a little bit more, but usually is that people don't know what to do with used items, used tech, and they don't know how to recycle it. But now I'm seeing, I can speak for Bangkok at least, I see a lot of selected places where they implement like huge yellow trash bags and said this is especially for recycling batteries and stuff, and then recycling used iPhones and everything like that. So that's good. But yeah, let's actually broaden that a little bit and talk about UN has seen a dramatic increase in e-waste, isn't it? So if we were to, talk about that in the perspective of Thailand, how is it going to impact us? Or not Thailand, I'd say ASEAN, because e-waste can mean a lot of things too, right?
True. And like I said, we are going to be big producers in general this part of the world because the population dynamics. It's difficult to reverse that. There's growing income, growing aspiration to buy things. One of the things, I think you're very right, it's now more common, and even I've seen places around Bangkok and other parts of the world where segregation of e-waste is becoming more popular and acceptable. And that's definitely the kind of educational campaign we want. But we also need a process in the back, right? You need to be able to collect it. These car batteries, by the way, are huge and can also be hazardous. It's going to be quite difficult for us to go and take it to a e-waste center. What we really need is to take it to a maintenance, a petrol pump, no petrol pumps, right? EV charging stations. So actually, that will be the best place, or your outlet, the manufacturer's outlet, and they need to safely take it out, store it, because believe it or not, it's once it's degrading, you've got to transport these things quite properly. There'll be a whole box of them, and there are specialist companies around the world that are already doing this sort of stuff.
Right.
So they are collecting it, storing it, taking it on its way to a recycling facility which has all the licenses. That's the other thing. We don't want this going into the informal sector. It's too dangerous. We need at least those big batteries to go right to a proper facility where proper techniques are being used to take this metal out.
But then it's very limited then in the number of manpower, in the number of location that is being implemented as well.
True. We are just at the beginning. I would say most of Asia, I think, is probably still just making the legislation. Thailand actually hasn't passed the law yet. There's a great e-waste management plan. There's a national e-waste management plan. There's a strategic integrated plan telling people what to do, and there are educational campaigns. But the actual law is in draft form. It's under stakeholder consultation, so that's a good sign. They want everybody's inputs in. But once that is passed, the next stage will be to make sure that the people already in the recycling industry probably need to upskill themselves, because it's a different kind of waste. And then the most critical thing is, what you have to extract has to be of very high degree of purity, otherwise you can't actually reuse it. So there's going to be some technological skills that need to grow around it.
How can technologies such as digital twins be implemented to track the e-waste? Not just track, but like recycle, be a part of the recycling process, and promote responsible disposal of them? So
that's a very good question, actually. And digital twins is something it's a very, very good...
Explain to me digital twin, the concept of digital twin.
Okay, so digital twin is essentially a 3D mapping of a city. If we're talking of a digital twin for a city, it can be for a part of a city, or it can even be larger. You can even do a national level digital twin, but it will just have different granularity to what a city has.
Right.
And a lot of cities have successfully done this. We've got all the, I would say, bits and pieces, the groundwork for it. You've got enough satellite data. It's going to be data hungry. So let me say that at the very onset. It's going to be data hungry, and we have to prepare for that. You capture all the elements that make up a city. So really easy to do your road networks and anything that you see, the buildings, hospitals, schools, all of that. Waste collection centers, right? So neighborhoods, you kind of map that. The more tricky bit is knowing what's under the city. So when you're looking at sewage system, water, sometimes power can be over and under. It's quite complex to actually get it all in one place.
Right.
Some cities have invested in it and are doing it in bits and pieces.
Do you know what cities?
Singapore is a great example, as always, in this region.
Singapore,
other than Singapore, we got to say. Rotterdam is actually doing a port version of it.
So, really?
So they want to, because it's one of the very important port towns of Europe and a transshipment area for lots of things coming from Asia and being distributed.
Yeah.
So they were already quite ahead of that. So they're doing a good version. There's other small places in the US. Almost every global city has some version of a digital twin, by the way. Mm-hmm. Bangkok's working on its little version. It was up in I think it is in Benchakiti Park. They have a life scale model. When I say life, it's you can walk through it. So there's a model of a city. It's about the size of a room, or 2 rooms maybe, depending on how you go. So the Chao Phraya River, you can walk through the river. It's not wet; it's sort of there, and you can see the city on both sides of it.
Yeah.
And they've got something around pollution sensors, energy sensors. You know, the information sign on the bus stop that's telling you when the bus is coming.
Mm-hmm.
That's also part of a digital city program,
really?
for example.
Yeah. Okay, well.
So it could be all sorts of things.
And how is it used to track e-waste?
You would have to set it up to do that, because there'll be e-waste. First is the neighborhood level, and that's just your collection points for that.
Yeah.
More interesting would be your industrial facilities or manufacturing facilities, where you could kind of see the route it's traveling and the stages of it. So it would have to be designed quite specifically for the e-waste purpose. But there would be a general solid waste digital model which shows that each catchment is served by some sort of a collection point. So that's what you can do very well on these models. You can say, like, every 5 to 10 kilometers, there needs to be a waste collection point of some sort, where either you can drive or put your waste, or there are people collecting it from your residence or your office and taking it there and displacing it.
I get, well...
It's a long way.
I see it being a possibility. It's just, it's a long way.
Yeah.
That's another thing. But I see Google being one of the key main players in helping create these digital twins. I'm talking about the Google cars that run around to map around, to map out Google Earth. I think that's a very good key players for governments to actually interact with them and see if they can help out, especially managing such a big thing like this, big challenge like this, especially in the fact that they just spend, like Google, like billions of dollars to come here. And there should be something going on.
They should be giving something for free, right? They are definitely sitting on a lot of data, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is in some ways being used, but maybe not in a formal way.
Right.
There are some versions, I think, that Google potentially is able to sell that data. But yeah, it's a good thing actually for cities to be able to use some of it. It's expensive to keep and store this data. If we're talking about energy as well, right? You don't want duplicate sets of huge data sitting in data centers, which are already energy intensive. So it's okay for somebody to have a data and you use it. My only question on that would be like strategic and security matters, because you don't want to hand too much of your city's information to a private entity.
Yeah.
So that's where you need
not just that, but you're also giving space as well.
Yeah.
And you talk about not just space, but the ecosystem around that space.
Yeah. So in many ways, yes, you could use the final product of the data. There has to be some sort of level of security that stays within the city. It is too important, for a city for everybody to be able to access it. I would say from a strategic point of view, the city needs to keep the control, but yes, they should have other participants helping them, creating algorithms maybe for them, or helping analyze it, or specifying, or running pilots. That's a great way to involve the industry actually, running small pilots, which then you can scale up. When you say pilots, you mean like test runs? Yeah, like trial runs, pilot projects, demonstration projects. Do you know anything about that? Like when are they coming here again? The Bangkok Metropolitan Authority is currently working on a model. Yeah. Remember, it's not the time taken to digitize it. The city is constantly changing, so to keep it updated, because there'll be a new school or a new building or a new facility coming up. So it's got to be almost real time, just like Google is in a way. You're right, absolutely. I think it's work in progress. It keeps getting better and better. The first thing, as I understand, they're trying to do is to make sure that, for example, emergency services, right? How fast can your services reach you within a 5-kilometer or 10-kilometer range? Those kind of things are quite easy to track once you've got your roads there, you've got your medical facilities, you've got the incident, the fire stations. Yeah. So the model will easily tell, okay, somebody's reported, oh my gosh, there's an incident here and we need help. And they'll know which is the nearest center from which they can send an emergency team. That kind of stuff is happening to some extent. It can be improved, but that's easy stuff to do these days with what we have. This is good, because we can link this to
another topic that I'm very interested about, the 15-minute city. So let's explain to the audience what 15-minute city is. This concept, it sounds me. But when we actually look at it through a microscopic lens, it's much more so than that. And we had this talk before we started filming it, that it's actually not a 15-minute city where you can get to different places in 15 minutes. It's actually a 15-minute sub-district within a city. But all the districts basically work together in kind of like an ecosystem in a way. And that kind of correlates to what you're talking about with the EMS, for example, as well. But yes, tell us more about this 15-minute city concept.
It's caught on quite a lot in the last couple of years, very recently.
Yeah.
Actually, so there's a French academic, Carlos Moreno, who made it more public, or his paper got a few eyeballs.
Was he the one who invented this concept?
You could say in a way, but I would say he kind of crystallized it and spearheaded it, and he's got 6 elements that comprise these 15-minute cities. And then the Paris mayor, Anne Hidalgo, was a great supporter and a champion of this. So this has been really successful in the arrondissements, if I get my French right, of the
Quoi?
in Paris, anyway, the districts of Paris. And the idea, you're absolutely right, it's not always the city. Cities are not too huge. There will be some small cities which can do everything in 15 minutes. But the idea is that is the time in which small districts or mega neighborhoods can access social facilities, cultural facilities. They can go to the local shop. Healthcare. Basically, you don't need to use a car to do your very basic things.
Right.
That's the idea. And there's also a social aspect of it. They want to keep it quite sort of heterogeneous mix of people, that kind of a thing. So that was the idea, but then cities have adapted them. You don't always have to go 15 minutes. Scotland wants to do 20 minutes. Melbourne has got a 20-minute city in its plan, in its vision for the future. Utrecht in Holland is going one step ahead. They want a 10-minute city because they're already so cool. Everybody's cycling where they want to cycle to, and they want things within a 10-minute cycling distance.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's a more freewheeling concept in some ways.
Yeah, but in a big city such as we are in Bangkok, you think is it viable?
At the neighborhood level and maybe the sub-district level,
right?
Definitely, like a 15 to 20 minute is definite. We should be aiming for it anyway. Everybody should have access to a few basic social things, right? Within that walking distance, cycling if you want. It's a bit hot.
7-Eleven.
Not just 7-Eleven. You need a bit more than that, right?
Yeah.
Bangkok is very dense, but as we go outwards and we look at the new suburbs coming up, I think we can plan them a little better.
Yeah.
Within Bangkok, we definitely need more green spaces too. I know it's part of the plan, but to make it happen.
Another story.
Yeah.
It takes a while.
Yeah.
So it is viable. Let's just say it is viable, but not in the time period that we have.
Yeah, they're working towards it. Remember all these plans, putting it into plan is the first step. Then making it happen, you need action plans. To some extent it will happen.
Yeah, to some extent it happened. I think there's a lot of like challenges or like hurdles you need to get over, and in cultural context, is that one of the challenges you think as well?
That's a lot of it is also in the Americas, because there was a whole
car country.
period. So that's their infrastructure is designed for, like, cities are designed for cars, right? And they've got a lot of space there. Plus the automobile industry kind of made people believe that if you don't have a car, you're nothing. Then that status thing caught on very heavily. I would say in the global south, it's a status issue. And most countries, you see this happening. You start your life with a cycle, bike.
Yeah.
And then if you don't have a car, everybody's like, they don't even have a car yet. And the bigger, the better, right? So there's definitely a cultural element. How do we make it cooler, to not use the car so much? That's one element of it.
Over my time in America, there's a correlation between owning a car means having money, having a well-lived, a good job, basically, and you're well-lived. Yeah. But that kind of mindset is what we're trying to fight in a way to minimize that. But again, it is a car country, and America is such a unique case in the sense that there's more parking lots, more car parks than there are spaces for car parks than there are spaces for people to live in. And 15-minute city, we're literally just talking about Bangkok here. Now you try and implement that in America, which there are places in America being implemented that. But it's, again, with that place, it's a long way to go as well. But we are trying. But in the cultural context, developing country might be a better and more viable solution first. And it's a good thing because we have, I keep using America, but they're basically the staple for everything now. We have America as our placeholder for us to, better our development, I guess, in a way.
I guess so, but it is more multidimensional now, I would say, than it was before. Especially when it comes to walking and public transport, I would say Europe has been more at the forefront just because of the way the cities were designed, right? They're more compact, and it's always been a step ahead there. And then we look at China. We cannot not talk about China as well, right?
You can't forget about China.
There has been a lot of investment into public transport and rail and buses there. So there's definitely that element there.
Yeah.
And then India, I need to always talk about India as well, now the most populous country on earth. And Indian cities, they were a bit slow with the mass transit as the rail-based metros, but then they've caught up. And now you see there are about 25, 30 cities which have got metro systems in places. There's a lot of bus use.
Yeah.
But then India's also got a massive upper income population who want to own cars. So it also has a very large car ownership ratio, for example. So yeah, it's bigger countries have different challenges.
I know, yeah, definitely. I think, speaking domestically, definitely, because our audience mostly going to be domestic, even though we're speaking English. But with public transport, I think that's one of the key things that we need to work on, definitely. We still use buses from the 1950s still, and that needs to change. Obviously, it's a grey area in a sense, but if we just reduce the use of personalised vehicles and look into putting more budget in and finance in public transport, 15-minute cities, no problem, I don't think.
I agree. I totally agree with you. It's a two-way street, really. You can't tell people don't use cars, but then they've got to move in some way.
Yeah.
On the bus fleet, I agree with you. So I've seen a couple of types of bus fleets in Bangkok. The new air-conditioned ones are super cool, right? And they're very nice. And then there is the old fleet, which I think is going to be retired soon. It should have been retired by now.
No, they should be retired.
Yeah, I don't know why they're still hanging on to them.
They just repaint it and be like, oh, new car.
No, I'm sure there's a policy. And actually, there's one of our partnerships is with the EV Association of Thailand, EVAT. And they're working quite hard to, and a lot of other agencies, of course, to make this transition into electric buses.
Right.
So I suspect you will see the old ones just going out and being replaced by maybe more efficient e-buses very soon. These things do take a little bit of time because one of the challenges with e-buses is you've got to get your depots right.
Right.
Every time you see a battered bus, right, people always think, why do we have... Usually the problem sits behind. They're not being maintained properly, or there are not enough people skilled enough to understand how to maintain them before. Like when you have a car, right? If it's crashed or something is broken, if you have the funds at least, you would immediately go and try to sort it out.
Yeah.
Bus companies worldwide are always in a bit of a cash crunch anyway, because it's a subsidized service. So the priority is maybe not there. But that's one of the reasons why you see the fleet is deteriorated.
It's much more so producing the cars rather than maintaining the cars.
You're going to it's the whole life cycle as well. And that's what a lot of what we do as well is to make sure that, it's not just that you bought it, you've got to run it maybe between 8 to 12 years, 15 years. It depends on the city and the country. It depends on the wear and tear and the usage of the bus. But that's how long it's going to sit
Do you think bringing in EV public transportation helps?
Right now, it's the way to go to spur the EV movement.
Yeah.
Because you see, the capital cost is, as you know, higher. Getting better now.
Yeah.
Now, but originally, I would say if it was 5 years ago, it was still almost too high. And then you need the charging infrastructure in place. So most countries have done this wherever they had commercial fleets, whether taxis or buses, or app-based taxis. They tried to get them to move first, because at a depot, it's easier to create this bespoke infrastructure.
Yes, yeah.
And also, these are vehicles which have some sort of fixed income, right? You would assume if your bus is running on a good route, that means your cash flow is slightly better.
Yeah.
And once you've got the industry going, then more and more people can just sort of transition at a private level too.
But it's just that, like, okay, well, in Thailand at least, the public transportation that the people use, majority owned by a private sector.
True, that is also, it's informal, and that's common in lots of parts, again, I say, of the global south.
Yeah.
People obviously don't recognize it much. There's a demand for it. Firstly, there's a lot of this, what we call feeder systems, right? You got to come to the BTS, or even if you want to get a fast bus, you're going to either jump on a bike or a tuk-tuk and get there. And that's your informal transport, or also like workers being transported in these minivans and things like that.
Yeah.
That bit is difficult, but there are very good success stories. I'll take India as an example for something like the Indian tuk-tuk. And there's been a massive increase in electric tuk-tuks. In fact, most big cities in India now have a electric tuk-tuk, which feeds into the metro system.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah. So when you get off the Delhi metro, for example, there'll be a whole line of tuk-tuks. Some of them are small ones. They'll take you right to your doorstep, and some of them are shared. So they will drop you like some distance from your apartment,
right?
And it's very affordable. And they're using this battery swapping thing, by the way. So they're not doing there are two types of the plug-in charging, and there's the battery swap. For some reason, the electric tuk-tuk, that has taken off quite well. Sometimes there are fleet owners who have like 10 of them, and they're then subletting them or leasing them out to somebody who runs it for a day, gives it back. They just swap the battery, give it to somebody else. And this is now catching on in many other parts of the world. We know in Indonesia and Vietnam, people are already talking about it. And there is a company called E-Tuk in Thailand. They've got some bespoke models coming up. So there's stuff happening.
Really
there's
good.
stuff happening, yeah.
I think that's it's a much better way of transportation. At the same time, bringing tourism too, especially.
Yeah.
Because that's like a staple. Vietnam's doing it, Indonesia's doing it. It's like grab tuk-tuk, why not?
Yeah, grab tuk-tuk. Grab bikes, obviously. I think we saw at one of the Seta events, there's a grab bike displayed under it was half in water. They had, did you see that? There's like a little thingy, like a box, half filled with water, like just to show that even if it rains, your bike will be okay.
Yeah. Take a step back a little bit, and I kind of want to touch back on this the process of recycling of e-batteries, and talk about because you mentioned a lot about the still existing raw materials inside recyclable batteries and how they can be extracted, but no one's really doing it, right? Is there any initiatives that are being begun or are actually implementing on doing that right now?
Absolutely. It's not an easy process, which is why not enough people are doing it, and it's quite a skilled process. So there are two main ways, as I understand, of recycling these batteries. There's one around heat, so it's pyrometallurgy, where you need high degrees of temperature to separate out the metals of interest. And the other is using water, so it's shredding things underwater. So those are the two main methods of doing it.
Like water? Or?
Like water, but there's a lot of chemical process involved in that.
But wouldn't that produce more waste?
Here's an interesting thing, recycling is also water intensive and energy intensive. There needs to be more improvement in the process, so that is behind recycling these batteries, so we don't use that much energy or water. And apparently there are some Swedish scientists who have come up with another process where they have 100% recovery rate for aluminium and 98% for lithium.
Really?
which is super high because usually it's 60 to 70% recovery
Yeah.
of all the stuff that comes in.
90% is like, it's literally like a new battery. In a way.
But it's just one of the elements, remember, that goes into the battery.
Yeah.
Extracting anything is great. And so here's what happens in the process, very, very broadly. You've collected all these and you've got to dismantle them. Increasingly, people are using robotics to dismantle because also it's safer to use them. Some of these things can just combust if they're not properly handled. You don't know the level of degradation they've gone under.
Yeah.
They have to be transported at very optimal temperatures as well, right? You can't do it in the heat because, again, you've got a lot of batteries in a truck and that's going to go bad. So that sort of happens. And then once this first few stages of this process has gone through, there's something called a black mass that comes out, which is literally like black, and it has a lot of things in it. Then they then treat it with various elements or catalysts to extract the metal they want. And sometimes there's a sequence, you put something in there and then first maybe you get aluminium and then you put something else and you get cobalt. Apparently, if you change the sequence, then the amount of metal you recover and the purity can vary. So that's where all the R&D is going into. Right now, that's what people are doing, trying to see how they can recover the maximum amount of metal, but also it's got to be very, very pure. Otherwise, it's not going to function in the new battery. That's where these are some of the ground challenges of the industry.
It won't function as a battery if it's not extracted properly.
Yes, you can't even reuse it because there are specifications from the government. To create safe batteries, the metal has to be of a certain degree and quality.
That brings me to the fact you mentioned to me before we started filming about space debris. Now, space debris is supposed to be non-renewable in a sense, but it's categorized as, what was it?
It's not categorized as e-waste.
It's not categorized as e-waste.
It's really funny about, this, you and me
But
were
it's
doing
renewable,
some,
no?
It can, some parts of it should be renewable, but you have to collect it anyway.
That's
the other thing is floating around, right?
Yeah,
it's junk.
It's floating
Space
around.
junk.
Exactly, yeah.
We were doing some work in which we benchmarked a few things, and we were reviewing a United Nations study.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting what is currently not classified as e-waste. Batteries that we think are e-waste, they don't fall into the e-waste category officially because there's a separate end-of-life treatment for the way that those batteries have to be used. It's still waste, but classified slightly differently. Space debris, not classified as waste, but the European Space Agencies and I think NASA and people, they've got a program in place. They want space to be sort of waste zero by 2030. So there is a program on to recycle and collect this. There are a lot of startups actually which are doing interesting things around the world in trying to tackle waste going around as well. There's a third interesting category, by the way, which is all the material used in the defense sector by countries. So that's not e-waste, but the digital missiles or all your computer systems or everything really in the defense sector. There's a certain element of e-waste there, but for strategic reasons or for reasons of national importance, I would say, it's not really put in the e-waste category. I'm not even sure if it's declared openly. So actual e-waste, when you say like 62 million tons or something, it's probably more than that.
Right, because 62 million tons is what is declared.
Yeah, it is what is declared. Or there are some methods they have of calculating what's in the informal sector in some ways. So there would be probably more of that. The first step actually for many countries is to be able to track your waste. And something interesting is coming up called digital passports for electric batteries, actually, electric vehicle batteries. Because sometimes it's only like a panel of cells which are degraded and maybe you could replace them. So now, and increasingly the car manufacturers are going to have a lot of responsibility, or the bus manufacturers for that matter. If their battery is going somewhere, they need to make sure that it's come back responsibly to them. So there's like a stamp you have, when it's coming back into the recycling center, they can audit it. They can see that this is the battery that's been dismantled and now we've extracted stuff from it, or even to the cell level. That's a serious process actually. that's going on.
And how is it going to be implemented to everyone?
Some countries have passed legislations around it, or they're thinking about it. They've got to formalize it for two reasons, actually, because you see, green finance is coming in. What we spoke about in the beginning, greenwashing. How do you know for sure that the battery was disposed of and is not sitting on a pile in a landfill?
Yeah.
So that's what the tracking is doing, and a lot of technology is being used. So it's actually to make sure that you've completed the full circular economy cycle, actually. There are rules and regulations around it, but it's got to take off.
There's actually a new series, I think, on Netflix about this, mainly about the psychology of how the big tech companies are using psychology in the way they marketize their product. They tell you that we recycle them, and you are doing it, but you never seen it being done.
Do you believe it? We have to be careful not to get into too much of the conspiracy theory mode. But the fact is only, I think it's something like 20 to 22% of waste in the world is recycled. Less than a quarter is recycled, even informally. In a lot of countries, I think in Thailand as well, you see there'll be some chap collecting some cables and things from, you can even give things from your home. That's the informal sector, and then there's the formal sector. That means that most of the waste is still out there, going to landfills. And the rate of recycling is increasing. People are getting more aware. But the rate at which waste is being generated is like 5 times more than the rate at which it's being recycled. So you're right. We hear about things being recycled. We just hope that there are enough audits and checks in places. And in many countries, I think if you declare something like that, you've got to show your plan. There's a bit of corporate governance involved. I think if the companies are listed, or they're taking certain international funds, they will have an audit process in place to show that it's at least going to the right centers. I think we have to sort of have that much faith, but there are obviously a lot of non-profits or other entities who would happily challenge that. And I think they're doing their job as well in challenging many corporates to say that, are you really doing what you're saying what you're doing? That's happening too. So
I think this digital passport is a great idea. And is it being implemented at the moment? Has it started?
Yeah, so I think there's a firm called Ducosi in the UK. They're starting to do this. And it's they're also trying to be more sustainable, because if you don't need to throw the whole battery out, maybe you could just replace some bits of it and still keep it working. Or sometimes maybe it's not fit for a vehicle anymore, but can be used for something else. And there's a tracking system which shows that there's X amount of efficiency or energy left in the rest of the cell pack. So it's still suitable for some purposes, and you can then transport it for that purpose.
Okay. What about in Southeast Asia?
I think it's early stage, because to track
How
that
early
you
are we
have,
talking about?
If the will is there, you could do literally anything in 2 to 3 years.
If the will is there.
I always say that, the only things that take time are when you're building mega bridges, and maybe, I don't know, a train station or something, or a metro system, for example. That takes time, because you've got to either go underground or overground. But things which are policy and regulation related, yes, the legal bit of it takes time. But if the will is there, and the resources, of course, if there are examples in the world these days, it's easy, right? You look at other countries, you get your team of experts to sit with their team of experts, and you start working with the industry. These things are being talked about. To be fair, literally every country is talking about it, but it's the speed at which they do it.
Yeah.
And Thailand is an automotive hub for this region. So the sooner they get to it, the better. And there's a benefit, by the way, because Thailand is one of the top 10 producers of rare earth elements. And these are elements, like, I have to confess, I didn't know many of them, like scandium, yttrium. These are not things we usually learn of in the chemistry class.
Yeah.
But they go into literally every electronic product. And right now, Thailand is exporting them to its neighbors. But as demand grows, because they also go into electric vehicles or wind turbines and things like that. But as demand grows, you want to keep some of it here, which means that if, you actually don't want, most countries may probably not want to send their e-waste, especially battery e-waste, to other countries if the process is good enough that you can get the valuable metals yourself. Because there's going to be a shortage in the market, one way or the other.
Yeah.
So you might as well extract your stuff and purify it and reuse it for your own country.
Are we doing that?
Well, people, that's just me being strategic. But obviously these metals and minerals are not evenly spread in the world.
Right.
Just like you remember, there was the coal era, then the oil and gas, which is, all of these things are not spread. Some parts of the world have more, some have less. Mm-hmm. So there's always going to be pressure, to import these. And then what happens is the prices of the commodity vary. That means when you and I buy a product, it's dependent on that. It also means it's less equitable because wealthier countries can afford to buy expensive things and afford to sell them at a particular price point. Mm-hmm. But we have growing economies around the world, and we still need people, the economies to grow. There will still be people buying vehicles.
Yeah.
It's kind of, the recycling bit or the circular economy bit is important. The sooner we get it in legislation form or a regulation form, the better it is, from a long-term sustainability point of view.
Promoting e-waste, recycling and refurbishment, what are the economic benefits, especially for a developing country, especially what we're talking about in ASEAN, APAC? What are the benefits and environmentally and economically for countries like that?
It's a long period we're talking about, because remember, in the short term, nothing sort of is very evident, or some things are evident, but some are not. One of the things we got to realize is these are toxic substances that are going to the landfill, and they're leaching into the soil, probably into your subsurface water, and that's not a good thing. Then also a lot of waste collection disposal is done in the informal sector, so that's actually affecting the health of the people who work in these areas, right? They're picking things out. That's a social context.
Lawsuit.
Yeah, social context, that's some of the stuff. But generally speaking, the economics, remember the economics of fossil fuels also work because there are various subsidies, and not an understanding of the total social cost that happens. Many cases, oil is very cheap in some countries. As we know, in some countries it's super cheap, and in some countries it's not, it's taxed. That tax revenue is important for some countries actually as well, so they don't want to not tax it. If those kind of things could slightly move in the favor of renewable energy or recyclable batteries, then you have a level playing field, which is actually what a lot of experts in COP say. I won't deign to go too much into the territory, but there are a lot of professionals out there who have been arguing about this, how to spur people onto better things.
What's the current primary goal for renewable batteries? Like the world's, what's the association that kind of deals with like renewable batteries? Can you say EVAT?
Well, in Thailand, yes. EVAT. It's going to be national level. Europe obviously does everything by the European Union.
Yeah.
And people who are part of that legislation will pass it.
Is there anyone who like actually oversee the whole globally?
That would be very tricky to do in general. I guess you're talking of like maybe a equivalent of a nuclear association or something like that. There will be forums that people obviously will talk of, but everybody will have a different mix of the types of electric vehicles. And we should also actually use the word low emission vehicles. We talk a lot about electric right now, but there's also hydrogen, right? And many countries are betting on green hydrogen to fuel their transportation systems and their industries, which obviously for industries, it's a whole different ballgame when they're trying to decarbonize. I think getting national consensus is the first step. Regional or national would be the first step.
But again, like we talked about, each nation, each country has its own, not just legislation, but resources and the amount of population and waste to think about.
Yeah, they do. And there are these United Nations forums, like when people sign up to, like the COP, for example, when you sign up to things there, you have committed to something. So those are the forums that you're talking of, like people committed to, we have the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, for reducing carbon. Those forums are good. Ultimately, you need to have a law because, it's like the law of a country as well. So it would come down to that level. But we could learn from best practice. There's some people who are ahead of the game, and definitely we should go and look at those examples and then incorporate them in the policy.
Are there any latest advancements in battery recycling at the moment, technology-wise?
So there's one interesting thing that's going to happen. We talk a lot about lithium ion, so there were lead acid batteries in the past, which I think were easier to recycle, but then there are other challenges. For electric vehicles, lithium ion has been very, very popular. It's energy dense, so it's got good energy there, which is why people use it a lot. But there's a game changer happening, and that's sodium ion. So actually
salty.
Well, salty, yeah, definitely. And easier mineral to procure is there's a lot more sodium on Earth than lithium, for sure.
Hello.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how the purity levels, but the two interesting things, as always, China has been ahead of the game. So they're testing lots of vehicles on the sodium ion batteries. They're not that energy dense. So it's at the moment, it seems you have to charge them, maybe not charge them more, but maybe their life cycle is a bit less, but people are working on it. There's another interesting thing, I think it's Yarra Valley in Australia. They've decided to power a couple of buildings using some sort of sodium ion batteries. So these batteries can be huge enough to power elevators or things like that, right? So when you talk of technology, what's going to happen is, right now there will be lithium ion. Don't think it's going to go out of fashion time soon. But recycling companies have to adopt to different styles of extracting minerals and metals.
Different type of battery, energy storage system as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we could talk about energy storage, which is a whole...
Yeah, true. So with energy storage system, how should we go into this?
Yeah, energy storage, I think we need to understand why we need them first. And that's because we've all now committed to going renewable. So we've got solar and wind energy, and we've got hydro. So hydro water is a bit more reliable. I think it's also got probably some variation. But solar, as you know, is when the sun is out.
Yeah.
And the wind blows. It's better in the sea, but it has seasonal
But the
variation.
thing with those renewable energies is that, well, it's not only, how should I say, it's eco-friendly and eco-reliant.
It is reliant on the environment around you.
Yep.
Absolutely, yeah.
Energy, as energy does and energy goes, if it's not energy, it flows all the time, 24/7, every way, and it can be transported into everything. So that means that if the energy that has been created or generated and it's not being used, it would just...
Yeah, if you've not stored it at the right time.
So this energy storage system,
absolutely.
This is what it's trying to do. So,
and the grids are not able to cope with these variations in energy. That's a big problem that a lot of people don't talk of. All the countries which are renewable rich at the moment, the grid gets a bit upset when there's too much or too little coming in. It needs a steady flow at a certain rate. So the solution then is, when you've got to make hay while the sun shines, right? It's the same thing. So when you've got the peaks, you store them in these energy storage solutions and you release it as and when you need to.
Can AI be involved in this?
I think AI is already involved. It's funny.
I think so.
AI is we use this word because it's trendy, but there was automation. Wherever automation was feasible and possible and sensible, people have been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
AI, I think, is just, maybe it's taking it one more level up. For example, in the renewable sector, if you look at wind turbines, right, or the offshore wind equipment.
The one in Bath.
The one that's in the middle of the ocean, right? Or not quite in the middle. It's a couple of kilometers usually from the coast.
Yeah.
Because that's otherwise you get it.
The one just south of Brighton, just a little bit. Just hi, hello.
Yeah, there's a lot in Northern Europe and the North. That's one of the very rich offshore wind parts of the world anyway that you see over there. And just off the coast of Scotland, I think we know there's loads of them. So in that case, it's expensive to put them there, and they're massive structures. By the way, you can't imagine how.
Are they floating? No, not floating on.
There are floating offshore wind structures as well. Absolutely, and they need very specialist engineers there to make it happen. So because especially when you look at Japan, that's an area with high seismic activity. And they're worried about the foundations. So there's a different type of floating offshore wind structure turbines that come up there.
How is energy stored then?
Well, that's just creating the energy. And if we want the AI comes in the fact that, or the automation or the robots, there are a lot of sensors looking at the performance, because it's not that easy. If a particular turbine is going to fail, you've got to send engineers out on a boat, right? Which is not super easy. So, and you obviously you don't want to disrupt your energy system. So these sensors can tell you in advance when certain parts are failing or they need replacement.
Oh wow!
That's where the AI is coming in.
Right.
Of course, solar panels. The robots are using. There's a lot of robotic cleaning of the panels, and the tilting of the panels, which is maybe not
the rotary system.
Yeah, because it's kind of got to follow the sun.
Yeah.
So those things are kind of already happening.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I missed your question about how these batteries are going into.
No, how the energy, and then so if there is a way of generating energy, let's talk more about the energy storage system that is being implemented then.
True.
I mean, I know for a fact that, I know that by we I mean Seta. Seta is going to be co-partnering with an event soon on a conference event and an exhibition trade show on solar energy storage system in Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a fact that we are going to be talking more on the energy storage system and how we can actually store these energy without it being, like we understand.
Lost.
Yeah. But is there any kind of, bringing back to the question that I asked you about renewable batteries, with energy storage system, is there any kind of like advancement in the way we can store energies?
Absolutely, and that's been one of the very interesting cases for used car EV batteries or bus batteries even. A lot of them can be repurposed quite easily to store energy.
Right.
And actually, maybe the complexity is less than trying to extract valuable metals from it. There is a degree of efficiency though, so you can use them, but then at some point you will have to replace them. I think there are people working on that. So that's definitely something that's happening. There is though a study, I think there are a couple of industry studies that say that repurposing will remain one of the important things that you do with used batteries, but recycling and extracting the metals seems to be the better proposition long term. There's only so much of energy storage maybe you can use with those sort of batteries. But there are some other interesting things, to be fair, that you can do with them. In the US, they are trying to use these batteries as backup for data centers. I think, again, is it in France or somewhere, they're using them to back up elevators, in case there's a power cut, or maybe when they're doing maintenance or something. You always need a backup anyway for a reliable system. And in Japan, they're powering streetlights with them. So there is some energy in these batteries even when they're half used or almost not suitable for the car anymore or the bus, because range anxiety is a real thing. So what you don't want is like have a battery that fails halfway. So that's the point. I think to be on the safe side, they would just be asking you to remove it. But there's still enough. Like this is the afterlife, they say, right? The batteries get afterlife in these sort of users.
Actually, in Japan, there's like the sidewalks that's basically generating energy as you step on it. Like, I think one push into the sidewalk generates like 10 seconds into the light bulb. I think we talked about this. Same times.
Right.
But from when we had that conversation, it gave me a little bit of time to think about that. And I'm like, we have a lot of rain. We have a lot of rain in Bangkok, and I'm sure like other places around the world too. And that might not really work. It might short circuit something. But I don't know. Maybe.
But you can do it in, what you could do in Bangkok.
Just do it inside the malls.
You've seen the shopping malls and how many people are always thronging the malls. I bet we could power like half a shopping mall with the amount of shoppers we have.
That's very sustainable.
He just had. In fact, I think there's an airport in the Middle East that has them as well.
Really?
Because you have to think of places like railway stations.
Yeah.
Your BTS. You have to think where there's a lot of footfall.
Yeah.
And just try to capture it. It's tiny, but it's okay. Every little helps, as they say.
Yeah, every little bit
and
helps.
I've stolen that tagline from who, but we'll use it anyway.
Every little bit helps. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or just do it. That's not a tagline.
Exactly. I mean, there's tidal energy as well. People have been doing a lot of thinking, but there's a reason why coal and oil became so popular? It's just because you could just produce energy more easily.
Yes.
And solar is great. The sun is there for us, I hope, for a long time. But the amount that goes in and the amount that comes out, the efficiency is not as high.
It's way different.
And same with wind. But then the long-term impact, right? We talk about all of this happening. We've got Bangkok's one of those cities. We have air pollution problems in many parts of the world, right? And that's one of the reasons where the transition has to be faster. I know we still have a long way to go on making the energy systems in Bangkok more green, because it's still quite fossil fuel dependent. But there is a pathway now. But still, even if we'll probably be shifting the source of the pollution a little bit.
Yeah, I think we
People will
kind
breathe
of have the
better.
plan, but we need implementation. Just people actually working on it and actually do it, especially carbon capture. Talking about
Well, that's a slightly controversial topic, but it's on.
Oh, no, I'm all about controversy.
It's all about controversy. We can touch lightly on carbon capture. Some countries of the world are heavily into this, especially when you talk of hydrogen, right? There's green hydrogen and blue hydrogen, and there's all these lots of colors of hydrogen. And some of them are around the fact that you've managed to capture carbon and store it, so it's comparatively better. The hurdles around that are there's not that much use for this stored carbon.
Not really, no.
So you can keep capturing it, but also those resources going into that, we should be developing technologies that are helping pure green energy, right? So that's the debate around it, but it's got a role to play, I'm sure.
Yeah. Hopefully soon. All right, well, that's it then. Well, it's been a pleasure having you in this segment and talking with us about EV batteries and how we can reuse them. For anyone who's interested in Miss Gupta's, not only her work and her profile, where are you present in any of these social media platforms?
We're there on LinkedIn, so people can follow the IXOM Consulting webpage. And we do publish from time to time. I'm sure we'll be collaborating with Seta more. So look forward to publishing something with you.
Yep, you can expect her not only articles but also interviews, especially this podcast, on not only on our channel but also on our social media as well. To everyone who's interested in Seta Connect, please follow us at setaconnect.com, as well as every other social media is in the link below. And yes, I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you
having
very
me
much,
here.
Ira.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.